All right, welcome back to the Movie Whale Marathon. I'm Andrew.
And I'm Matt. Yay.
Yay! And we are on Pirates of the Caribbean, on Stranger
On
Tides.
Stranger Tides,
Sorry, I
yeah.
almost forgot. That's a note I have for later. I don't like the title of this movie. We'll get to it. Directed by Rob Marshall, came out May 7th, 2011. Starring, of course, Johnny Depp, Penelope Cruz, Joffrey Rush, Ian McShane, Sam Claflin. I'm just gonna call him Finnick, even though it's Philip. I'm just like he's Finnick. Um, Astrid Burgess Frisbee as Serena.
What a
Um,
name.
I know. And then a handful of other people. Of course, Kevin McNally is back as Gibbs. And yeah, a bunch of other faces. Judi Dench shows up for a second. But yeah, whatever. Pirates of the Caribbean 4 on
It's
Stranger
also
Tides.
kind of worth noting in all that stuff that since we're past the original trilogy, we should note that the writers are the same for this one. We still
Huh.
have Terry Rossio and Ted Elliott
Oh, thank you.
writing for this. They have additional writers, so it's
Uh-huh.
possible that these guys were more advisors or something, but still getting a writing credit. I'm not really
Yeah.
sure how it all went down. In the previous films, it was just them credited for the writing. So there's movement away. We have a new director as well.
We do. We do. I think it shows. I don't.
I think it is too.
Yeah, so I had an interesting relationship with this movie. It is very similar to Kingdom of the Crystal Skull, and which when it first came out, I was like, ew. And then I watched it again, and I was like, no, this is fun. And then I watched it again in the context of all the movies, and I'm like, you know what? No. Ew.
Ew.
Because,
Yeah.
it's so... Gosh, where to start? I don't even know where it's. I don't think it's horrendous. I don't think it's awful.
No.
I don't think it's
Had
disgusting.
this been released on its own, I think it probably would have done okay.
I think it would
It
have been
wouldn't
fine.
have started a whole franchise, but
Right.
it would have been okay.
I think the opening is fun with Gibbs and Jack as a judge. I think that's silly and
It keeps
very
up a little bit with its lighthearted critique of the system, with the whole bribery,
right.
and fallible evidence, and all
And
that.
he uses his twisty words to have people say that Gibbs is guilty of being innocent. It's like, oh, you saucy minx. So I don't yeah, but like.
Should we start with the blonde highlights in Jack Sparrow's hair? Because that's weird,
yeah, it was
right?
it's a little weird. I think they're trying to attempt to make it look like it's bleached by the sun. I don't know if
But
it's
they're
working.
in Europe with this one.
I know. I do think
and not like Italy, Europe.
Yeah.
Like
we get to the point now with this one and the next one as well. Jack has like too much shit on his head now.
yeah,
He's always had a lot of stuff on his head, but now he's got like braids that just look like rope that go down to his knees. Like it's too much, I think. I'm sorry. It's too much. We were at the point now, and let me quickly confirm this so I don't talk out of my ass. Alice, and yes, this is after the Mad Hatter. So this is now the time when all of his following roles were kind of caricatures of Jack Sparrow, and now Jack Sparrow has become a weird amalgamation of all of those other roles. And it does show a little bit because it doesn't feel as natural as the previous Jacks, if that makes sense. It's not nearly as bad as the next one, but it is slightly present here.
I think that's true of the whole movie in the sense that I think it has the bones of a good Pirates film, but the execution is not as finely detailed as the others are. Because again, you watch these films and they masquerade and kind of have the energy and mood and tone of just a fun summer flick. But then you have to really pay attention in order to really get at it because so much information flies at you so quickly and in such creative kind of twisted, bended ways that you have to have your brain on and processing in order to really get what's going on. This film lies on the surface.
Yeah.
I mean, they have multiple lore drops, and it's not like they didn't have lore drops in the other films, particularly the third one. It's just that there's no mystery or surprise to this one.
There really isn't.
Other than the chalices, but you kind of learned about that.
It's not really a
halfway
surprise.
through?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, I also God, I'm trying to keep from ranting because I do want to be a little more succinct with this, just because like these movies have been, for better or worse so far, like you mentioned, they're so layered. There's a lot of thought. You have to watch them a couple of times to understand like the ins and outs. The villains have been very intellectual. Beckett wasn't a physical powerhouse, and the physical powerhouse being Davy Jones had emotional weaknesses. Like it was interesting, and now I just feel like all of that's kind of gone, and I think that's a really missed opportunity here, because I don't necessarily hate that we went with Blackbeard. I just don't
I think he's
like.
a cool character.
I do think he's a cool character, and I think what's his name? McShane, something Shane. Is that a different actor? I know I've seen him and stuff. I'm really bad at names. This is the wrong movie. That's Alice in Wonderland. Yeah, sorry, Ian McShane. I think he does well as Blackbeard, but my dog is begging somewhere and I don't know where she is. I don't love really anything that they do with Blackbeard except for his beard burning, like historically accurate Blackbeard. I thought that was a cool touch. Because to introduce Blackbeard now, all pirates fear, and for him to not be a pirate lord, for him to not be involved in the last movie at all, for him to not be something they reference or acknowledge or even talk about, I kind of wish that they would have introduced Blackbeard like he was new. Because when Blackbeard dies, historically, he's we don't know for sure, it's like between 30 and 40. So you could have introduced him as a young man, a new pirate on the scene, so that it would make sense that he wasn't involved with the East India Trading Company and the previous pirates and Davy Jones. And now with the lack of Davy Jones, it allowed for someone this rogue and as crazy and awful as him. It's like, well, what about the story about Angelica being his daughter? I don't give a shit about that. That hardly matters. That's like one of the weird, dumb things about this movie. It could have been Blackbeard's sister or wife or whatever. Like, you could have done something else, or you could have avoided that completely. Like,
It's not that I am going to argue so hard to keep it, but I will say the Angelica being Blackbeard's daughter and the tension of whether or not that relationship was fully requited from either of them, I thought that was kind of fun and cool. But not in a, wow, this really highlights the movie kind of way, just in a, that's an interesting character dynamic. And they're pulling it off, acting-wise, decently well. And that's not in a lot of this movie. So, okay, it's sweet how much Philip / Finnick cares for this mermaid, right? Mm-hmm. But the love element doesn't really make sense, right? Especially when, in comparison, the other love story you have in this franchise is childhood friends to lovers, where they have known each other and been in each other's circles.
Very Disney princessy.
I've known you,
I've known you for a long weekend, and now we're in love.
This is the priest churchman falls for the temptress siren, and because they are both different, which they have to like kind of forcefully explain with Serena, and also like. I'm digressing a little bit, but like, why would he name her Serena?
It's such a weird
moment.
He
is a man of God.
Where he
would name her like Mary or something. Like he wouldn't.
He snaps and yells, "She has a name," and then like it becomes very clear. But no, she doesn't actually.
And she doesn't have a name.
She doesn't have a name. You just named her almost like you're naming a pet, which I don't really like. Finnick, I don't appreciate. It's strange.
Agree. And I don't think it's a weakness of character. I think it's a weakness in writing. It's not meant to be,
for sure.
It's not meant to be a flaw of him. It's just that the writers didn't fully think that.
All you had to do was include a moment of dialogue earlier where she clearly says that she has a name. Like that's all you had to do, man.
Exactly.
The mermaids talk. They have language. They have a community. They would have names. They would have names. If anything, it's weirder that she doesn't correct him and just takes this human-given, man-given name. It's a little gross.
Agreed.
It's a little gross, Rob. Do better. That's
No,
why I think this movie should be called Pirates of the Caribbean Siren Song. I think it works a lot better than On Stranger Tides.
I'm not sure how I feel about the alliteration, if I'm being honest. Usually alliteration is a solid sell for a title, but I think
it's
Pirates of the Caribbean has more rhythm to it.
Okay, well then come up with a better one. It's just the subtitles of the Pirates movies have had way more impact or significance. On Stranger Tides, that tells you nothing. That tells you nothing. Siren Song is important. We need the mermaid tear.
What?
Sirens have significance to sailors' mythology. The mermaids are introduced in this movie. There's a whole singing sequence. Siren Song. It's right there.
The only thing keeping me from sharing this title is that it felt a little cliche, and then I realized yours is Siren Song. So, Water of Life.
Water of Life. I mean, okay, that would work because it's the title on the cups. So, yeah, I would take that.
And not only that,
sounds dumb though.
It does sound a little dumb because it's a little basic, but it's about the Fountain of Youth. It's about pirates who make their life on the water. It kind of, the tear also is water. That's a part of the whole equation. There's a character that's literally dying because she's not in the water. Mm-hmm. That kind of works. It's just a little basic.
I would honestly
feel like Siren Song is really basic. So.
Okay, it's basic, but it's good. Okay, it's good because it works within the movie. It does. You cannot deny that it serves the movie better than On Stranger Tides. Come on.
The tides thing is odd. I will give you that. There's not even, arguably, the strangest thing they encounter isn't even in the water. They're on land to find the fountain.
I know.
So
absolutely. So anyway, we'll talk about that for an hour if we don't stop now. I think it's just one of the many unfortunate faults of this movie. I think there's genuine fun to be had here, but I don't think anything really stands out and shines.
Positive.
Yes.
I feel like the Angelica character is fun, and I really like her introduction scene. I think the fun of the way she's introduced, brings us back to the vibes and the quick-wittedness that we get in the Pirates films. It's reminiscent. It's not equal to, but it's reminiscent of the fight scene with Will in the Forge.
Yeah.
Like the blacksmithery.
I see what they're doing. I just don't think it's as fun. I honestly, there's a lot of this movie where I do find myself unfortunately bored because the fight scene with Will and Jack has so many implications. And then the fight scene between Will, Jack, and Norrington, like on the island in Dead Man's Chest, and then the fight during in the maelstrom on the Flying Dutchman, like they're all so grand and crazy, and they grow. And then there's like this fight with the doppelganger, and because we want to keep it a mystery, it's mostly in shadow, and they're just kind of, it's
a little contrived to be in shadow some of the times. They're both standing on the fire pit, and one of them you can see their face, and the other you cannot. I'm like, they're getting the same source of light.
I see what they're trying to do, like you said, where it does kind of mirror the fun of the first one, and I can't appreciate that. But narratively, the implications of the whole sequence annoy me because Angelica is recruiting pirates, and she's recruiting them as Jack, and Scrum is annoyed at Jack because he thinks that Jack is impersonating the real Jack Sparrow. Yet when the king's men show up at the tavern, he says, "Mistress, we've got company," or something along those lines. He's not surprised that there's a lady there, and he is not talking to Jack. So is he in on it or not? Because they do not make that clear at first what Scrum is doing. And then it's like, well, it's because you have to recruit pirates as someone else because everyone's scared of Blackbeard. It's like, yeah, that's great. If only Blackbeard had a way to control his ship without scared crewmen. Oh, wait, he does. Why does Blackbeard need a crew at all? He's got a magic sword that controls his boat. Where does that come from? Why does he have that? No fucking idea. Never talk about that at all. That is another genuine complaint. I think there's too much magic in this movie. We had a movie where we went to the in-between purgatory world where we fight fishmen and we release a god, and I think there's too much magic in this movie because there's a lot of magic in this movie. Magic that doesn't necessarily serve the situations. Like Blackbeard is borderline a wizard in this movie and does more magical things in some ways than Davy Jones does. And Davy Jones is like, he doesn't have one of his organs and can teleport, and that's saying a lot. That Blackbeard has like a magic wand, controls the ship, is hunting magical creatures, is seeking out the Fountain of Youth. He's got zombie people. He raises the dead in his spare time, and he does voodoo, and he has a closet full of ships that he is magically contained. He's a wizard. He's a wizard, and that's just a lot. There's a lot of magic in this movie, and I don't love it. But I'm sorry, I've been talking a lot. That was a lot.
I kind of agree with the magic point. I think maybe it just comes a little too fast and too varied rather than staying focused, right? Because the first films have a lot of casual magic. They just eventually connect them back to a common source. Like, we have, the pearl, and we have, which we don't really fully know to be magical, but whatever. We have the Aztec gold and the curse. We have this magical compass, and all of that goes. Well, the curse gets explained, but a lot of the other like supernatural elements of the first film go pretty unexplained in the first film, and then we get more connections back to like Tia Dalma and stuff like that in the second film, or even the third. But in this one, we get Fountain of Youth, we get magic sword that controls the ship, which I think is really cool. I would keep that. Maybe find a better way to justify it, but I would keep that. There's obviously the compass, which does still come into play. I'm really glad we didn't forget all of our tips and tricks from the first few films. We have the voodoo stuff, which not totally against, but it is strange that Blackbeard has like a couple of like, I guess, medicine doctors or like witch doctors on staff. And if we're going to go ahead and say that he's got someone who can see the future, a quartermaster who can see the future and make prophecies, can we at the very least make the prophecies rhyme or have rhythm or something? Like, that was such a boring thing to hear. Like, I almost didn't even register it as prophecy. I just wanted to, like, find a way to... I was like, it's a decent setup in the sense that like there's a reason why Barbossa would pursue the Fountain of Youth or Water of Life if he thinks he's gonna die. I kind of like that Barbossa plays an Ahab role in this film, down to the lost leg, revenge mission, all that. But we got to talk about how he's aligned with the British Empire, because that doesn't totally work. And they make a point out of trying to make it that like show that it doesn't work, but whatever. Point is, if we're going to use magic, let's dig in and actually use the magic. If we're going to meet sirens, let's dig into that a little bit, because all we really have is a weird, like, you gotta just suspend your disbelief romance and the fact that she's basically an ingredient for the magic spell.
Yeah, I don't love that. It's kind of and weirdly objectifying.
They want to humanize her, but
they literally do. They do.
Yeah,
they do. They humanize her.
Do. But just like from a writing perspective, you have to do more than just make her pretty and a love interest in order for that to work. Mm-hmm. I think Pirates of the Caribbean is the perfect franchise to point that out with, because none of the women in the first few films are just there as decoration or as love interest. They're all incredibly active players in the world that they're living in. And then we just are like, but she's a mermaid, so it's okay if she's just a pretty face, and we just match her up with the sweetest heart on the crew and we call it a day. Uh-huh. It's a little... which is kind of annoying, because I root for them. I ship them.
Well, of course, because they're cute.
In a meaningful way. Yeah, exactly.
I don't mean to bring this up every time it does happen in the movies we talk about, but I do find it a little bit strange to introduce a clergyman now, after the last movie literally released a god. Like, what are we trying to do here? You know what I mean? Like, we don't have to Indiana Jones everything, where like every realm of deity does exist. But let's say it does. Okay, fine. What are you doing, clergyman? Because you've got your perspective. That's all good and fine. But as the audience and as Jack, it's like, you really aren't doing anything for us right now. What are we supposed to take from this? And like, he's only here because Angelica wants to save Blackbeard's soul, which is a whole other issue, honestly. Because you got no chance, man. If Blackbeard is Blackbeard, like, this is a fool's errand, as they'd say. So, because you didn't kill the priest, you're all good and fine. I don't want to speak for God, but I wouldn't be okay with that. To be completely honest with you, he's killed so many other people.
Ooh, it's a very superstitious, but kind of traditional take on religious morality. And I think that was kind of the idea. They started us out over in Europe, and obviously we're in London for most of it, but then there's Angelica is
Florida.
Hispanic. So we have a heavy Spanish influence on the film.
Spanish.
I don't mean...
Yeah, because we're in Spain, remember?
Yeah, exactly. That's what I'm trying to say. Not Latin America, like Spanish. And, I mean, she was... One of the quick things in that confrontation scene, the doppelganger fight, is that she was going to be a nun.
Yeah.
So the girl is religious and just like fallen out a little bit. So it would make sense to me on a sort of personal scale, I guess, where she would have like this traditional belief that killing a man of God would be a greater sin somehow than like regular murder, which isn't a thing.
Right,
I
guess for some reason,
but
sure.
Traditionally speaking, that was definitely a superstition or held belief.
Okay.
Because they're God's people more directly than just like a believer or an average person, I guess. I don't know. That's not really how it works, but it's fine.
Well, see, I understand that point and I understand her thought process there, but it comes back to the whole thing that she's Blackbeard's daughter, which I don't like. I understand you appreciate and like their dynamics for the acting and how well they do that, but what are the fucking odds that the only woman that Jack Sparrow has ever had feelings for is Blackbeard's daughter? Come on. Come on. Come on. Just
no, I agree.
Stop.
That's a part of what it feels so, I guess, contrived and all of this. And like, you could kind of say the same thing about, well, no. I was going to say you could say the same thing about Elizabeth and Will in the first film, but you really can't, because Elizabeth just kind of hitches along on the ride with Will's situation,
she's
and all the story makes sense
for anything
from that.
Or anything like that, yeah.
No. She just saw him and his destiny and thought, I'm going to be involved in that.
Yeah.
And then made her way to be the Pirate King, so she definitely got involved. But in this case, it's way more just a roll of the dice. Jack happened to fall for Blackbeard's daughter, and she didn't know she was Blackbeard's daughter until later. And she's, lying to Jack about it because she says that she's running the scam, but in reality, she actually is. She genuinely cares for him in the way that a daughter might care for her father. And it seems like he has at least some affection for her as well, even though it doesn't really pan out at the end, right? I do like this contrast, though, of Blackbeard as an iconic pirate being truly, built out of pirate morality, and Jack is here being altruistic. It's interesting, because I think every film goes to lengths to show Jack's altruism, except for the second film, which is the one where he has to be trapped to sacrifice himself. So, it's interesting. But in this film, it's even, they go even further with it, where Jack is admitting that he's got feelings, and he won't
sacrifice an innocent man for the Fountain of Youth power. It's interesting.
I mean, there's a lot about this, and he even at the end of the film seems to imply that he no longer wants immortality, which is a big change for the character. And I'd like us to know a little bit more about why he would abandon that. Is it just because every time he's encountered something that would make him immortal, it's awful?
Yeah. I mean,
that's true. But I don't see Jack having moral quandary of tricking someone into drinking water so that he could live their years of life.
I honestly don't like that was an accident. I kind of would have preferred if that was intentional. It's clearly an accident the way that they play it at the end of the movie with him messing up the glasses. Because if it was intentional, he would have just sat back and watched and then said, "Oops." But it's not. He stops and he's like, "Wait a minute. Maybe it was the other way around. Here was in that cup and
I always interpreted it as
it's so
theater.
He's
putting on a show.
No, it is so obvious that he messed it up. That he forgot which one was which. And it would have been way better if he intentionally did that. Because there's no way to know. He was counting on Blackbeard being a good person because the whole movie Blackbeard has been illustrating that he cares about Angelica, which it's really hard to tell until that very moment where it is he's actually leaning. Because he gets pissed at Jack for threatening her or saying that she's not his daughter, for insulting her. He puts her in danger, but also doesn't. Like it's really not clear.
In the same way that you would prioritize a pet that you like.
Ugh, gross. Yeah, I guess.
Like he likes the idea that someone's looking out for him, so he protects her, but he doesn't love her.
Yeah.
I
think that the way he acts in the end, he's not upset that it's an accident. He does not care because who cares for Blackbeard? But he did not do that on purpose.
I have to watch it again. I do think if we wanted it to be one way or the other, this is not the best cut for that then, because I have always just assumed it was theater that Jack put on, and he was like, well, actually, I switched them. It was the other way around because I knew you were a heartless man who would kill the one person I've had feelings for.
They've spent 3 movies using his little side glances and his eyebrows and cinematography to illustrate when he's clearly Jason Bourning the place and he knows what's going to happen. He's setting up the dominoes. He knows what he's doing. And in this moment, it's not. They are not doing that in this moment.
In the beginning of the film, they telegraph the way he's getting out of the palace. Yep. And I think that's bad.
I loved it. I really like it a lot.
I think it's bad.
I appreciate it's a little overdone, but I appreciate him casing the place and keeping track of his resources. And the next movie undercuts that so badly. We'll talk about it next week. But it's this sequence is important for why the next movie is so bad. And again, we'll talk about that later. But what is it you don't like about the escape?
Compare and contrast, I suppose. But I think that a part of Jack's charm as a character is that he is incredibly intelligent. He's also fond of rolling the dice. He doesn't plan everything out to the last minute. He keeps track of his resources and just plays the cards as he has them. And I think that the problem with the telegraphing in that scene is that every piece that he notices is used. Not necessarily that is bad planning, because that's perfectly fine planning. It's just that it feels slightly prophetic in a way that it maybe shouldn't.
It's a little much.
Jack uses chaos to his advantage a lot of the time. If he doesn't have chaos to work with, he creates chaos to work with. And in this scene, it's planned to the second. I mean, otherwise he wouldn't get the little pastry back off the chandelier. So I wish there was a little bit more of a gray area where, he doesn't have to notice the window right away because the window is so big that that's an obvious element to the room. The chandelier, maybe he notices when you do a bit of comedy with the pastry and it lands up on the chandelier. That makes sense. That's funny. That's good. But it's just to have every single step laid out is too detail oriented, I think. I think Jack would notice all of those things. But he would also notice, the 2 or 3 doors out of the room, how slippery the floor is, like all of the elements. You'd probably even consider going out the chimney. It just there's more going on than the exact things he ends up using to escape the room. It feels too cut and dry for Jack Sparrow.
I can appreciate that. I think a middle ground would be better for sure, because I like the idea of him being smart enough to plan things and not just always James Kirking it and just relying on blind luck. So I just that's mostly for next week. Let's move on from that particular. Otherwise, I'll harp on it too much. So another thing I did like though for a moment about this movie was Jack building rapport with this new crew on the Queen Anne's Revenge, and I think there's a whole movie there if you wanted to do it, where Jack is taken out of the captain's spot for good and has to build up this new rapport with the crew, cause a mutiny, and fight Blackbeard. Like you could do a whole movie with no magic and like full blown Rise of the Planet of the Apes Caesar it, where he is slowly learning the ship, acquiring resources, and learning everyone's ins and outs, and people realizing that he's a better leader and he is altruistic. Like, that would be great. Because there's an interesting aspect of the mutiny where Jack realizes no one has ever seen Blackbeard on the boat, so there's no reason to think that he's actually on the boat. They've all just been hoodwinked. So it makes complete sense that they're like... There's so much logic in it. And then it turns into a magic ship or whatever, but I don't know. I like that the crew leans towards Jack. I feel like there's something there. Something that could have been cultivated.
Well, I think it's particularly funny that they signed up for Jack's crew.
Yeah.
And he's like down there like, well, you can work for me. We just have to mutiny first.
Yeah.
Like, I think that's fun and clever. But then this would require serious rewrites, but it would explain Blackbeard's absence if instead of masquerading as Jack, Angelica was masquerading
like
as
Blackbeard wasn't real.
Yeah.
That could be really fun. People would riot, but that could be fun.
It would require rewrites because I think the whole film hangs on this one line. I actually wrote it down. Jack says, "You are en route to get yourself killed, and I am not inclined to stand by." So, like, sure, he's kind of trapped when he's with the crew, but we know Jack. He could have gotten away from them fairly often. I mean, there would have been obstacles, but if Jack wanted to get off the boat and get away from the crew, he could have. The reason he's around is because he has decided he's going to protect Angelica because of their history, and he feels responsible for her fall into piracy, which I kind of like, especially if we're going to go ahead and emphasize that Jack is ultimately an altruistic character. And so if you were going to do the whole Blackbeard is fake thing, you don't have something to project Angelica from. So, I don't know. I think that's a part of why I do like the Blackbeard Angelica daughter thing with the whole, like, are they gonna have a healthy family relationship or are they gonna turn on each other sort of question, or rather is he gonna turn on her, because she clearly isn't. I like that. I just think that it needed to be written better. I think we needed a little bit better motivation. We need a more convoluted story with Pirates of the Caribbean, because this is way too simple. We start out with a map to the Fountain of Youth and we end at the Fountain of Youth. Like, yeah. It's way too, like, railroaded for a Pirates film. Yeah.
A couple of little notes real quick of positives. The King of Spain. He's hot, man. That man is beautiful. When he walks in and he's got, like, his boots and his cape and his like puffy sleep shirt. Anyway.
Sure.
I really like the moment during the conversation before the mutiny where Jack's like, "You have been deceived, gentlemen." And the one pirate goes, "We are decepted then." And Jack's just, "Yes."
Okay.
I genuinely like that. And then I really like when the guy from the first pirate movie who says that's got to be the best pirate I've ever seen runs up and says this land has been claimed by King George, and then the Spaniards shoot him, and they're just like, someone make a note of that man's bravery. Like, that is
Yeah.
such an awesome moment. I love that moment so much. But yeah. Oh, and then when Ponce de Leon is, I guess, still alive, question mark, in his bed, and Barbossa mouths, don't touch the map. It's so funny. I don't know why.
See, I was worried.
So funny.
I was worried you were going to mention that in the magic critique because I think that moment is brilliant.
That's
like,
that fits within the realm of magic we've already had. That's perfect.
We have two previously undead pirate captains fighting over treasure in a ship on a mountain as it teeters back and forth. The funniest thing that could happen is the man whose treasure they're trying to steal is still alive somehow. And they wouldn't even like blink at it because it's so normal to them. That's totally fine. That's hilarious. Yes. I love it.
Absolutely. I do enjoy that. I like the design of the mermaids, honestly, and the whole like human in air and monster in water, and like the scales that they have like all over their skin when they're in water. That's awesome. That really is cool.
I think that's really cool.
Yeah, I like their weird seaweed Spider-Man web weapons. That's pretty dope. I don't really get how the Queen Anne Revenge firing fire on the surface would hinder them underwater, but hey, I'm not a movie writer. What do I know? Them taking out a whole ship from a distance, fucking terrifying.
Loved it.
I'd almost rather go up against a kraken, to be completely honest. I do like kind of that Blackbeard is taken out not by magic, but by a certain kind of science, really, like a real poison, like poison dart frogs being the thing that takes him out. Is kind of cool in the end. I genuinely enjoy that. And then honestly, the visual of gross juice sucked Blackbeard at the end is kind of hardcore. The red tornado of blood followed by the weird juicy skeleton pointing. It's kind of awesome. I'll give them full props there. That's kind of where my positives end.
On funny moments, when they ask Jack to jump off the cliff, and he asks the quartermaster, "Am I gonna survive that?" And the quartermaster like takes the voodoo doll, and he's like, "Now you will." Like that's hilarious. Other things. Oh, I kind of want to talk about the mermaids for a second, the sirens, because I feel like they almost did something kind of subversive with the tradition of sirens, but ultimately failed because the sirens, particularly sirens, mermaids are kind of like folded into this tradition. But sirens are known for calling out sailors who are otherwise minding their business, tempting them out into the water, trapping them and killing them, right? That's what a siren does. But do you know what happens in this film?
They summon
Pirates
them.
Go to the mermaids, to the sirens. They put light out on the water because they find it pretty, and they sing to them to draw them to them.
That's kind of interesting.
So
I never really thought about that.
They've turned the sirens into prey, which I'm not totally against. It's just confusing then when they also portray them as
predators.
An armed.
Yeah. I don't know, actually. Now that you brought that up, that might bother me more than I really thought about it.
I want them... I don't necessarily need them to do one or the other because, like, hey, maybe, they're a naturally curious species, but they also have the ability to destroy a ship. Like, that's fine. That can coexist. It's just that if we're going to establish the mermaids to be a fierce species, much like the pirates kind of are in a roundabout figurative way, then maybe we should find a different way to hunt them.
Maybe.
Right? Because as it is kind of framed, they're mostly just minding their business when you call them over. And then we make this big... What?
I mean, they're not minding their business. Like, the mermaids are there to kill them. They are going to Like,
This is true.
They're
There's an
both
established
they're both
food chain
thinking
here.
of the other as prey. Like the pirates are there for them, and they are there for the pirates. It's they're like everyone's playing each other in that moment. It's just instead of the killer coming into your house, you opened the door and sat in your living room and waited for the killer. Like, I see what you mean, absolutely, and you like the framing of it is interesting and does kind of flip it on its head. But those mermaids were not there out of curiosity; they were there for.
And this is true, and I'm not trying to paint them in like an innocent light. It's just it feels strange because of the way that they try to drive home the whole like Serena is different thing.
Yeah, it's definitely muddled. Like, what are the mermaids' intentions and or motivations? Because did they have like a magical insight into people's hearts or souls or something?
And even like, what level of human do we want these to be? Because if they're human enough to, I mean, like, Philip has this whole very rushed arc about identifying her as God's creature and therefore more human than animal, I guess. That's a kind of crass way to put it. That's the way they're talking about it. And that makes, like, the interspecies relationship okay. But also, they eat humans, and there's also this weird element where, like, we're supposed to assume that the sirens and the mermaids are inherently aggressive, but Serena is different somehow. I don't know. They didn't commit to anything with them, and they ended up just kind of, like, honestly, it would have been better if they just needed a scale or something, and we just dropped the whole Serena storyline completely.
We gotta talk about that, because honestly, the movie, there are fun moments. Fine. It drags a little. Once we get out to sea and we're on the Queen Anne's Revenge, it's fun. Fine. There's some cool magic mumbo jumbo in the end. And Jack and Angelica interacting and working with Gibbs and talking to Barbossa and all that's fun. Fine. The rules of the Fountain of Youth are insane. How did they figure out and or learn that the combination of this water and the tear of an extremely rare creature and these two specific cups that have the spell word you have to say to get into the room, how does someone discover that? That's how you access the magic of the Fountain of Youth. Because it implies Merlin level wizard community building of such things, but like I always kind of thought the Fountain of Youth was like a natural, quote unquote, a supernatural element of the world that is honed and used. But there's like polyjuice potion level shit we gotta worry about in order to use this thing. That's a lot. That is a lot, and that's
and it's like, when you get there, it's clearly a designed location.
Exactly. There's like a tomb. There's a temple. There's Atlantis kind of shit here. There was stuff built. There's also, I really don't like, I'm so confused with whether or not Jack has been there or not. Because so much of the movie implies that he never made it. It doesn't really make sense that he wouldn't have made it with the compass. It makes sense that he made it and didn't know how to do it because he didn't know the ritual. How does he not know the ritual? I don't really find that believable that he wouldn't know. Whatever, let's say he doesn't. The rest of the movie then shows that actually, no, he doesn't know where he's going, and he never did. However, we get into the room with the fountain after we clearly discover the spell word, Aqua de Vida, to get in, just to find out that Barbossa's already in here and can only be in here because Jack either led him to it or told him where it was. And the Spaniards get in on their own too. So how, why, what?
And then Serena magically swims in too, and there's not really a good connection of water from where she was to where they are.
But there must be. So there's either multiple entrances to this chamber, in which case this weird portal water puddle thing that Jack makes is completely redundant and pointless. It's so muddled in the end. It is so muddled. I don't appreciate it. I had kind of forgotten what the Spaniards' motivation was, because part of me kind of thinks it's cool that they don't give a shit at all about the English on their journey here. And at first, I remember they destroyed everything because people shouldn't have this power, immortality and all that. I had forgotten it was because they didn't want it given out by anyone except their god, those fucking Catholics, and I had to roll my eyes and be like, what the... I liked you guys. Yeah, I don't know. It's kind of annoying.
It is a weird, especially for a film that does so much with the name of religion.
Uh-huh.
So, like, at the end, they're, like, these guys kind of out of nowhere are like, it is our sacred duty to destroy this thing that gives life, or technically takes life, I guess. So, like, you know, I'm not necessarily opposed to the idea of some paladin-style quest to destroy the Fountain of Youth if you feel like it is an abomination on the planet. It's just that if we're that worried about supernatural powers on the planet, why were you in your castle to begin with? There are things to conquer.
Yeah.
Like, we've got Davy Jones, we've got Calypso, we've got Undead Pirates, also, Aztec Treasure.
What better example, and I know there's better movie example, but like, name a better example in the pirate movies of forcing your religion on the rest of the world than crossing an ocean to another continent to destroy a magical artifact / landmass / site / thing, and then just leaving. Like, you didn't want to keep it, you didn't want to take control of it, you just wanted to force your perspective on the world on everybody else. You motherfucker. Beckett wasn't even that bad.
I don't know that we should prioritize the storyline in this movie, because these movies, while having political commentary, are not inherently about all of that. But to me, it is kind of odd to have a Fountain of Youth story that does not engage in some conversation about the indigenous peoples. Because...
Excellent point.
Like, the Fountain of Youth, the City of Gold, at the Aztec cities, the conquistadors, just in general. When we're going to talk about those things, the like presence of Native Americans is important to all of those legends and stories. And to neglect them is to tell only the narrative of the land was empty and perfect when we came, and so it is free to claim, you know? So if we're going to have... You know, I mean, they kind of get it in a second there when the Spanish show up. They, you know, England tries to claim it, you know, for the king or whatever, and that speaks a little bit of how ridiculous colonialism was. But it's just that, I don't know, the Pirates of the Caribbean at least had a pretty diverse cast, and they included various cultures, not really digging into, well, could have dug into slavery, choosing ultimately not to in the final cuts of the film. And so I'm not trying to say that we should take a political stance on this film. It's just that, to me, it is weird to neglect that part of the story.
Yeah. No, I get it. We could have done something with it, because that moment that is kind of funny with the British flag and the Spanish shooting that guy, that's like two people fighting over your house. Your house. One guy claimed your house, the other guy decided to kill him and then destroy your house and then leave. And that's what's happening. It's...
Oh, and weird counterexample, but I'm currently reading the only novel that Edgar Allan Poe ever wrote. Promise is irrelevant. And it's about piracy in Europe. Pretty sure. No, it's off. It's off New England. Anyway, piracy off New England, and one of the primary characters is someone who is half Native American. Now, the way that Edgar Allan Poe writes him, that's a different conversation. But the point is, Edgar Allan Poe included Native characters in his piracy story from New England. You could do it.
You could do it
in this Fountain of Youth story. You could do it.
Yeah, I don't feel like a whole lot was done well here. Also, we've completely neglected this whole movie without the Black Pearl. We
I
lost.
was mad about that.
Yeah, we
I was
lost
mad
the
about
Black
that.
Pearl, and Barbossa's on this Moby Dick Ahab style revenge story. Fine. But we completely gloss over that we've lost Marty and Ringetti and Cotton. They're all just gone. And sure, several of those weren't like main characters, but we kind of spent 3 movies with them. They all signed
The
up to go to the
consistency.
afterlife to save Jack, and now they're just gone? I would have preferred Pentel and Rigetti to scrum to be here and be Jack's like companions for the movie. Why couldn't we do that?
The consistency of the ensemble cast from the Pirates film is a part of what makes those films so fantastic. And
Yes.
I'm assuming it's a contracting thing, or maybe just a time skip thing, or maybe the actors are trying to move on to bigger and better. But it is a missing element. Like whatever the reason might be, maybe they tried to keep them, maybe they didn't. The movie feels less like it belongs in the greater franchise because of the loss of the Pearl, because of the loss of our main crew. Like, it's just, they really stripped everything from what Jack wanted, and it's just Jack wandering around on his own. Let the poor man have the Pearl for a movie,
I know.
man.
God,
Like,
please.
especially if we're gonna have Barbossa going off on this whole like revenge quest. Like, okay, so the pearl is kind of Barbossa's motivation. We'd have to edit and change that if we are gonna give Jack the pearl, which he should have had at the end of the last film. But we've already
Yes.
talked about that. I think Barbossa's revenge on Blackbeard can still totally stand if they just give him a different ship to be captain of. Like, sure, maybe he misses the pearl, but I feel like Barbossa is not as attached to the pearl as Jack is, right? So Barbossa could be convinced to give up the pearl. And we clearly have a bit of a time skip here. So Barbossa's been sailing on a different ship because
Mm-hmm.
Jack ended up on the pearl in the last film, let's be real. And then, Blackbeard takes that ship and Barbossa's crew and his leg, and he's like, all right, I'm coming for you now. And we still get this weird off kilter story that I want to execute better somehow. But I mean, the scene of Barbossa trying to, drink whiskey or rum from a teacup is pretty
That's
funny
pretty
when you
cool.
think about the sort of symbolism of it. But ultimately, that whole storyline feels wrong because you know that Barbossa is not a Kingsman.
Yeah.
Like, he's not going to stay in that role, and they keep him in it for so
I
long
know. It
in
was
the film.
honestly exhausting because I really love Barbossa and At World's End, where he's
Yeah.
become like there's camaraderie between. That was one of my points last week. Was I love how we're just all on the same team now, and now he's threatening Gibbs left and right. The only other character from the last movie who's here and also doesn't really get to do a whole lot of anything, even though he's also a fucking map, but somehow feels completely uninteresting. Like he's threatening him, he's threatening Jack, he's working for the king. It just feels like why do they have to keep putting Jack and Barbossa through this weird will they won't they relationship? Just let them be friends or have them be legitimate antagonists cuz the frenemies thing has worn out. It's exhausting at this point. It's too much. I'm over
I
it.
like I like the way they interact with each other in the second act of this film, where they're both stranded trying to get the
Uh-huh.
chalices, and like where they're at odds, but ultimately they're like, it's just honestly more efficient if we stop fighting each other and work together.
Yeah.
And like, that's where we should have them, where every time they encounter, they're sparring a little bit, they're bouncing back and forth and joshing a little bit. But to have them keep competing for the same ship is obnoxious because we know that Jack should have the pearl at the end of the trilogy.
Mhm.
And that one mistake from the last film, I think, really throws off the trajectory of these two characters in this film. I
Right.
think if we started with Jack on the pearl, encountering things on the water, I think we'd be off to a better start
Yeah.
on this film.
I absolutely agree. And I don't like how, really technically speaking, at the end of this movie, the pirate that comes out on top is not Jack, nor Gibbs, nor Blackbeard, but it's Barbossa. And look, I love Barbossa, but not to this degree. Like, we didn't get to see him lose the pearl and lose the crew and lose everyone. So this triumphant claim of the Queen Anne's revenge and this claim of the magic sword and everything, it's like, okay, fine, I guess, sure. And I get part of it is knowing that they don't get to fix the pearl, because I've seen the other movie, like knowing that they don't actually get to achieve that for X number of years, that just makes this ending feel even more unfulfilling. It's it's also like, so
I mean, okay, positive note.
Yeah.
Gibbs sticks around,
Yes.
and Gibbs is with Jack at the end of the film.
Yeah.
I think that's a successful move by the film.
That's sure, but I mean, I guess
That's not actually done in all of the other films. Like,
I guess
Jack and Gibbs are together in the second one, but in all the other films, they are apart for a significant period of time, either at the beginning or the end.
Fair enough. Yeah, I don't know. We only have a little bit of time left. This is kind of a nitpick. I'm curious as to your thoughts. I don't like the design of the Queen Anne's Revenge beyond that it's red. I think that's really cool. But I think of all the pirate ships we've been introduced to, this one feels the most like a Disneyland set. If that makes any, like,
Just
the extra
color.
story and the design of the railing, it looks so much like, look at where I'm performing for all the kids as we go down the street for the parade, so that they can see me.
It's incredibly decorative.
And to an extent, it is a masterful prop. The detail is great, but it doesn't convey fear in me where I kind of hoped it would. It feels more like the theme park, if I'm being honest.
They made this weird mix of royalty kind of aesthetic for the ship, Queen Anne's, and voodoo. They really should have just gone with one or the other, I think. Or start with the base design of one and then deck it out in the decorations of the others. Like, if it started as a royal ship, then it should look like a royal ship that has then been modified with like voodoo markings and whatever.
That is historically what happened. The Queen Anne's Revenge was a ship that Blackbeard stole. So I kind of wish they would have done exactly that. I'm a little confused, honestly, looking back, that Blackbeard is engaged in all the voodoo stuff. I don't really get why. Beyond, again, just giving him a magic thing. It's a little weird.
Okay, I'm gonna stand by the sword that controls the ship. I think that's really cool. But I will agree that the in-world reasons should have been richer. I mean, we had tons of lore around the last two sort of magic ships that we got, right? This needs more than just Blackbeard has a sword that controls things.
Right. Also, the last two magic ships we had were both due to gods. Like, the Black Pearl was cursed by an Aztec god, and the Flying Dutchman is a part of, like, the magical curse and or blessing that Calypso has put upon them. The compass is something that Calypso gave them. You know, like, this has so much magic that just comes out of nowhere. I can appreciate and understand the fun of Blackbeard having a sword that controls a ship, but then why do you have a crew? There's no point.
Good critique. I agree.
I
agree. I think he would need an army, essentially. He would want someone. I mean, you don't want to stay up controlling the ship at all times. It requires conscious effort.
Sure, then why not have just a crew of zombie people? Why are you recruiting regular people? There's like no reason for it.
I think the zombie bit is the part I would take out.
I've definitely.
Yeah, because it's also I don't know if this is right, but zombified feels anachronistic. Like, they don't have the word zombie yet, do they?
They might. Zombie comes from voodoo stuff. That's like where it originates.
So that's a good point.
That is not entirely wrong. It feels so bizarre. Again, just like, what do we do to make this movie interesting? Well, let's put in the Fountain of Youth and mermaids and zombies and magic swords and magic boats and like, it's a lot. And I think it maybe bit off too much. There's also now, looking back of the 5 Pirates movies, we have 4 examples of undead pirates, 3 examples of essentially zombie/ghost pirates, and these zombie ones are the least interesting.
Agreed. Yeah, I agree. there's a lot to use in a way that could be good in this film, but they ultimately just don't get into it. Like the other films are masterpieces of detail and storytelling. And I mean, a part of it is also just how good the dialogue is. If we're being real, Pirates of the Caribbean does not have the best world building we've ever seen. There are other greater examples of world building.
Sure.
But when it comes to, like, I guess feeling like a really well told bedtime story that's consistent to itself, the Pirates films are really good at that. In this film, there'd be windows of opportunity to go, where did Blackbeard get the sword from?
Right.
You know, what's with the zombie men? Like there's either too much time to think about it, or there's not enough explanation, or possibly both. Like you'd have to either speed things up and use them more in more consistent / interesting ways, or you just got to trim some things up and not use them.
Yeah, I lean towards a full overhaul, just from top to bottom. If you're gonna include Blackbeard, I think you should do something completely different. I think it should be a young man, new on the street, and I would have cast someone like way bigger. I don't hate Shane Ian. He's a great actor and all that, but I don't ever feel scared. And I honestly would love to go full like Jason Momoa sized dude who just walks out of that room and is terrifying to look at with the smoke. Because like Blackbeard had historically that impact on people. That was what made him creepy, was the smoking, burning beard and just his terrifying presence. But in this franchise, we've been introduced to a guy who's half octopus with a crab claw who controls the Kraken. Like, you can't really compare to that unless you wanted to go all out with a physical presence. And someone probably in the boardroom was like, well, how do we compete with Davy Jones? Like, well, let's give him a magic ship and a magic sword and a magic closet and a magic crew of zombies. Like, I can understand where you're coming from there. But then you have to ask the question very fairly, why has this guy never gone up against Davy Jones? How has he never popped up on anyone's radar? Like, you got to think a little bit beyond, is this going to make sense now? And if it was just a dude, the Lightning McQueen of the pirates, the guy who's been around for a handful of years and has just been wreaking havoc, taking advantage of the fall of the East India Trading Company, the abandoning of the pirate world of the Pirate King, and all of the pirate lords now being kind of all over the place, and Davy Jones being gone, and this guy stepping into it, that could have been awesome and could have easily kicked off another trilogy that would have been interesting, which we didn't get. So I don't appreciate that. I don't love it.
I think there's room in the lore to say that Blackbeard was around during all of the Davy Jones pirate stuff. You just make him, like you're saying, a young upstart instead, or even like not that young, like he could be 30s, you know. But the pirate lords thing was it wasn't based off success. It was based off who you were networked to, right? One pirate lord would pass to his successor, and then the next, and the next, the next. So, and I think it actually makes sense to say that there are legendary pirates that are not a part of the Pirate Lord Council. However, it would not make sense for Blackbeard to already be a legendary pirate and not be present / mentioned when all the pirates came together for the assembly.
Right.
So there is a world building question to deal with here that they just didn't.
Yeah. That's at our time, actually. So what do you think? 'Tis a whale? Because I don't think it's a whale.
It's an undead whale. A zombie whale.
A zombie whale? Alright, fair enough. I do have fun with it. It's just in context, compared to the other movies, it's not really holding up for me.
I agree. It's something that imitates the flavor and does kind of taste like it, but it's not the same thing.
Yeah. One more until we move on to another marathon, and I am dreading this.
We'll see. We'll see. I don't know how to feel about it. It's been forever since I've seen this film.
I've only seen this next one once, all the way through. So yeah, tune in next week. All right, bye.
Bye.